Creative Brain Candy by creators for creators.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. With us today is LW Salinas. She is a voice actress that narrates audiobooks as part of the Gonna Geek Network as a co-host on the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. She does some writing and acting on Strange and Unusual and Subject Found, which is a horror comedy audio play. That's a fun phrase.
Words are hard.
She also provides the introduction to better podcasting and the official Gonna Geek podcast. She's agreed to be here today with us to share with us her experiences in voice acting and audiobook narration. And without further ado, I will let Lauren take it away.
Hi, like Jason said, my name's Lauren. I go by LW Salinas for voice acting and writing because it's a lot easier to say than my married last name, which is Wisniewski. Fewer letters, easier to spell. And yeah, I got into voice acting. I'd actually stumbled upon it just to help out some friends with Strange and Unusual, which is no longer running. But after that, I remember when we were at a recording studio, one of the techs said, you know, there's two people in the cast that the microphone just loves their voice, and one of them is Lauren. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I lost my job. I had been working in a genetics lab for almost a decade. I had, in between the new head of department who was trying to downsize everything, and the fact that I have at the time, I didn't know what it was, but I have a genetic condition that causes me to dislocate my joints, causes me a lot of pain. And it had been getting worse, so I lost my job. And after about a year of just being at odds and taking on whatever jobs online I could find, I did a lot of copywriting at that time. But I remembered that nice little comment, and I'm like, well, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. How do you start doing audiobooks? And I just Googled how to do an audiobook. I found Audible has a kind of indie thing called ACX, the letters A, C, and X. And I made a little demo. I recorded myself reading Anne of Green Gables, just like a few paragraphs, put it on there, and started getting jobs. And that was in 2016. I believe my first book I finished in October 2016. And since then I have 20 some titles now. I've actually leaned into it. I've taken some voice classes. I've had some really great instructors, and yeah, it's not the job I thought I'd be doing, but it's one that I love.
Sorry, it helps if I unmute myself. How has audiobook narration and voice acting helped in your podcast career, and how has your podcast career helped with the other?
Well, I probably wouldn't have started voice acting and everything if I hadn't been podcasting. I've actually been podcasting since about, I think, 2011. I used to be a co-host on a no longer running show called Quantum Tavern. And after I started doing Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., our producer and co-host, Stargate Pioneer, who is an audiophile, was like, look, the mic that you're using is terrible. Let's upgrade your equipment. So it's through those slow upgrades that I realized, hey, I have this at my disposal. And with that, it's kind of like a feedback. I bug SP for advice on tech and learning how to edit. And the audio book experience gives me a lot more confidence in listening to my own voice, because when you have to listen to it for hours on end, yeah, there's not a lot of room for vanity there. Yeah, just it's been a really good feedback loop. I'm more aware of how I speak on mic. I'm more aware of what goes into the editing process. And I am definitely much more aware of my equipment and the environment in which I record.
Yeah, that's a major consideration, isn't it, BGA people?
I don't know why you gotta be throwing us under the bus.
I don't know why either.
I don't either.
No, I take that back. I do know why. 100%.
There's something where we're going to hear the answer.
So who else has a question? Austin?
Well,
go ahead, Tim. No, we're gonna
Paper,
play
rock,
this game.
scissors.
So I heard Tim speak up. Go ahead.
You mentioned that you upgraded your equipment, so I was just curious what equipment you're currently using and what software you use for recording and editing.
Okay, I'm going to start with equipment. I am currently using a Shure SM7B microphone with a cloud lifter because this thing eats gain. I have a DBX preamp, and I have, for the longest time, I had a Mackie as my mixer, but something with 8 channels just each channel successively kept crapping out. So now I'm using an Onyx 2.2 producer as my mixer, and it's working pretty well. I'm actually in the process of, I just moved earlier this year, and the first thing I did was claim a closet as my recording space so I wouldn't be stuck in the living room with all that echo and the ambient noise. So once I get my closet to my satisfaction, I'm actually going to be looking at a condenser microphone because that actually works a bit better for audiobooks. Sure, the Shure is great for podcasting. It's still great sound quality. But now that I actually have a space where I can actually install the sound foam, I spent all day yesterday installing sound foam, which you can't see because it's on the screen. It's opposite where I'm facing right now. Equipment to record. I originally started in Audacity, upgraded to RX6, which I still use for some aspects of it. I use some of the plugins to edit. And I'm back to recording in Audacity because for some reason it does not like my new mixer. RX6 does not like my new mixer. So, and Audacity recently, as of I think last year, pushed an update where now you can do what's called punch and roll recording. Previously, I had used Audacity. I had used Audacity. I'd used a Zoom H5 recorder. And the thing is, every time you make a mistake, you would have to, make a loud audible noise and go back and look for that in the recording and take it out. And it was just a very laborious process. So what punch and roll is when you know you've made the mistake, when you misspeak, when you find yourself tongue-tied, you stop it, you go back to the last part that you were happy with, and you start again. And it saves so much time. I've gotten my editing down from, for every hour spent recording, I would spend about 4 editing. And now I'm down to about a little over 2.
Yeah, that's really good. Austin, what do you got?
So in terms of, of your coaching, like when you said you went and got and learned some classes, could you tell me a little bit more about that process? Did you have to go on Craigslist? Did you go through someone official? How did that work out?
Okay. Well, I have never really considered myself an actor. I actually got kicked out of the drama club in high school. And so once I started doing this, I'm like, well, I'm going off of stuff that I heard on Rob Paulson's podcast, Talking Tunes, when I used to have a 45-minute drive to and from work. And it was just everything that I absorbed from there. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to make this a career, I need help. So I found out about there's a bunch of voice actors I'm in Texas, by the way. I'm currently in Austin. I used to be in Houston. And in the Dallas area, it's kind of the anime hub of Texas. And Houston used to have a big scene, not so much since the early 2000s anime crash. But I found out through another friend of mine who's interested in voice acting and through some convention connections about what's his name right now? I still get emails from him all the time. I have it listed on my website. I can't remember his name. I'm very sorry. He works for Sound Cadence Studios. He's done a lot of anime voice directing, anime dubs. And I booked a half-hour class with him just to see, hey, am I on the right direction? And the answer was I was in the right direction, but I had a lot to learn. One of the things that I got into after I lost my job was a show called Critical Role. And it's a lot of voice actors playing D&D. And I remember on an interview, one of them, Sam Riegel, who has voiced like Phoenix Wright and stuff like that, said that one of the most important things you can do is take singing lessons, because it gives you voice control. It gives you breath control, which is incredibly important when you're going to be talking 8 hours a day. So I just looked up on Yelp and found a music teacher right by my house, and that really helped. And then I kind of accidentally started taking a class with one of my biggest voice acting role models. Anyone familiar with Steve Bloom? He was the voice of Spike Spiegel in Cowboy Bebop. He's been Wolverine in like everything Marvel does since about 2008. And he posted on Twitter a little more than a year ago, hey, I'm going to be starting up this live voice coaching class. You have to apply. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to get in. But I applied, and an hour later I heard back and I'd been accepted. That class just ended, but it was incredible having like a good teacher who had a good ear for stuff, having an amazing class who kind of helped that feedback. I took a class that I found out about from, again, that same friend who got me into voice acting to begin with, the one who let me know about the coach in Dallas. Andrea Toyas, who's a voice director for Blizzard, had a voice class, like an all-day workshop in Dallas in November, December. So I went and did that. And that brought a whole new perspective. Something I keep hearing is find as many coaches as you can, learn from them, even if it's just one class. A lot of voice actors will have advice on their website. Some of them might run the occasional workshop. There's a really good book out by Yuri Lowenthal and his wife, whose name I've forgotten. She's an incredible voice actor in her own right. I'm sorry, my brain is just fried lately. But it's called, it's like, hold on, let me pull it up, because this is one of the most important voice acting books I've read.
You search on the fly.
Let's see. The book is called Voice Over Voice Actor. There's an extended edition. It's by Tara Platt and Yuri Lowenthal. And it has everything from getting equipment to doing auditions to just learning to deal with rejection, advice on voice exercises you can do. It's an incredibly comprehensive book. It's great. Even if you can't afford classes, because they are expensive, I recommend Rob Paulson's Talking Tunes and the show that he currently has, I think, every week on Twitch. James Arnold Taylor, I know, has some good occasional stuff. D. Bradley Baker on his website has amazing resources. Just the big advice here is just listen and follow whatever voice actors you like. Go to their website. They likely have resources. Ask them questions. Voice actors are some of the most incredibly approachable people that I've met. I used to work a convention. I've been hanging out on the Texas convention scene since the early 2000s. And there are the occasional big egos. You will hear about those people. But for the most part, I'd say about 95% of the voice actors that you admire and think, oh, they'll never pay attention to me, they are more than willing to ask questions, to help people out. I mean, most entertainment careers are about who you know. So everybody's kind of willing, most everybody in the voice community is willing to sort of reach behind them and pull people up with them. Also, yes, singing lessons are very, very important. And if not, there's a lot of great YouTube channels about voiceover or singing instruction, breath exercises, voice exercises, that sort of thing.
How's quarantine affected your voice acting and audiobook?
It hasn't really. I've always been, since I've started doing this, it's just me at home talking into a microphone. I do all my work remotely. I haven't so much made it into the part of the industry where I'm working with directors and stuff. So it's all just sort of me self-directing myself. And from what I've heard from, again, my last class with Steve Bloom, we were talking about this. And the voice industry right now is the professionals, the big studios, they're scrambling to try to figure out, okay, how can we have home studios? We need standards for how, people can record. A lot more work in the past few years has been remote. If you sign up for a studio or an agency, one of the questions is, do you have like a voice patch, which is kind of like a Skype thing where they'll direct you in real time, just over your headphones. Yeah, I'm lucky enough that I have not been in a part of the industry that's very affected. I do a lot of smaller, kind of more indie audiobooks. I'm just starting to get into a bigger crowd. But yeah, I'm incredibly lucky in that regard.
All right, so we've heard from Tim and Austin. Kat, do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually. What are some challenges in this industry that people don't really anticipate when they think about becoming a voice actor?
The strain. You will be talking, even if you're doing a video game or something, you're going to be talking a lot, and you really need to protect your voice. And that's not something I really understood when I started getting into it. As you can see, I can talk a lot for a long period of time, but there's a difference between how I'm talking now, how I talk when I podcast, and my actual narrator voice, where you have to have a certain timbre and you have to have a certain intensity, and you have to do that for several hours at a time. And learning to pace yourself, that's another thing I didn't really anticipate that I really should have. What else? Again, sound quality, never something I really thought of until I started having to edit myself and realize, oh, I don't sound like the people on Audible at all right now. There's so much, why does my mouth make so much click noises? This isn't right. And it's a lot of dealing with the frustrations of your own. Having the patience to be quiet if you do strain your voice. You don't whisper, you don't talk, you just kind of let it rest, because it is a muscle and it can be torn, it can be damaged. Actually, before I started doing any of this, when I was in college, I was really, really into football. I still am, but I am a terror at live games. I get really into it. I yell horrible things. And at one game, I actually blew out, there was a pop in my throat, and I blew out my voice.
Ooh.
And I'm pretty sure it's since then that I haven't been able to kind of reach the higher ranges that I used to when I was singing, things like that. A lot of voice actors have vocal damage from being asked to scream all day. You wouldn't believe, you play, Call of Duty, Overwatch, whatever, and you hear people dying. It takes so much effort to die. And if you don't learn how to do it correctly, you can seriously damage your voice. And most people have, because it's all the horror stories I've heard about it being a point of pride. Oh, I yelled until I couldn't talk anymore. That's not healthy. With audiobooks, again, I don't do as much yelling as I would, for example, one of the things that I was very proud of when I did Subject Found was I was a murder victim in the trailer. And my death, I did apparently so well that my spouse can't listen to it. But just the choking and the screaming, it's a lot of strain. Yeah, just being aware of your own physical limits. That's absolutely, to go back to the original question, absolutely the one thing that I did not think I'd have to take into account. Speaking of which, getting some water.
Yes. Caden, you have any questions?
Are there any particular, warm-ups or things that you do before kind of each recording session, or are there things that you do to kind of break up the recording sessions to, kind of get yourself back into the particular persona, particular voice that you're doing, those kinds of things?
Okay, I'll start with the warm-up. There's a lot of excellent warm-ups that I learned in singing classes on YouTube. Tongue twisters are great, especially for me. I have kind of a lisp that I'm working on. Right now, I've been tweaking my audio settings, trying to get rid of as much of it as I can. But anything that, like, there's words to, there's one, I actually screenshotted this from a group that I'm on, a professional voice, audiobook narrator group that I'm on. And this is one of the big ones that I do all the time. It's not on Tumblr. It's not on. Well, anyway, it's a list of words that are really, really, really useful to say. It's like Bob did go, Bob did go. You do that like 10 times. Again, tongue twisters. There's all sorts of websites where you can find good tongue twisters. The she sells seashells by the seashore, the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue, the tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips, that sort of thing. Breathing exercises, always good. Just deep breath in, deep breath out. It's also good for kind of relaxing yourself. And singing is actually a good way, as long as you don't blow out your voice again. It's, just put on a playlist of stuff that you like, sing in the shower, sing while you're at the computer, wherever. It warms up not only your vocal cords, but your mouth and your tongue, especially. Your lips and your tongue are so important. I've had to call a recording session short because my tongue just stopped cooperating because I hadn't warmed up enough. Taking breaks in between recording stints, I think you mentioned. Yes. I like to pause between chapters. It gives me a little bit of recuperating time. What I should be doing is record, edit, record, edit. I don't always do that because I really hate editing. But it's, just a chance to rest. And especially after you've been doing, say, like an intense chapter, it's a good time to just kind of recenter. Finding characters. What I always do is I do a pre-read of the book, just skim it over, find words that are going to be hard, names that are going to be hard, accents that I'm going to need to do if the author didn't provide it in the pre-prep list that I get. And I like finding a vocal model, like if there's an actor whose cadence you want to use or whose approximate vocal print you want to use. I've used J.K. Simmons for so many books because it's really distinctive. And finding if you're doing an accent, finding a trigger phrase. Is it okay if I curse?
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
Okay.
ahead.
I had to do a lot of Boston accents in my most recent book, my most recent 2 books, and I found that fucking cocksucker is a really good vocal trigger to get into that headspace. Whether it's posture, I think it was like my second book that I ever did. There was this one character whose mother, I would always record like this, like she's holding a martini glass, because it just helped me get into that state of mind and that voice. Make sure that you have a list written out. Don't rely on just your memory, because I guarantee there will be a character who'll show up in chapter 1 that won't show up again until chapter 20, and you'll have to remember what they sounded like. And getting into the headspace for scenes. One of my best reviews that I ever got was for a book that I did that involved 2 love interests arguing. And I was able to actually go back think on kind of a disagreement that me and my best friend had been having, earlier that year, and just kind of putting myself into that state of mind of, you're not listening to me, and the heartbreak and just everything. And I started crying for real while I was reading it, which, it's so good when that happens, but at the same time, having to go from a sobbing mess to the very dispassionate narrator is the challenge. And it's finding those moments, whether it's from your real life, whether it's from a book you've read, a movie, just being able to connect with the character, the scene, whatever. Andrea Toyas's class, she recommended putting music in your headphones to help you through auditions, getting a picture of a character inspiration, putting that on the wall and looking at it, going through, and if you're doing, like, say, animation or video games or something, making just a little background of biography of where you think this character would be from, what would it color their experiences. You don't always have to go that deep, but it does when you know where a character's coming from, when you find something that you really connect with in a character. And since characters are written by people, there's some experiences that are kind of universal: heartbreak, happiness, fear, and just try to live in the moment, which is kind of hard sometimes. You always get in your own head, oh, I hated the way that I sounded there, why did I do this emphasis? But that's all stuff that can be fixed in editing. It's much like writing. The first draft doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, as long as you know where you're going with it. Lot of reading and practicing and just figuring out what you love about a character.
Aaron, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to ask it, so I'm just going to give it my best shot.
Mhm.
I guess, how do you distinguish your different talking voices, and how do you develop to have, I guess, a plethora of different talking voices, and how do you, I guess, make those voices get better or whatever? I don't know
No,
if that made any sense at all.
it
but-
absolutely does. And I'm so excited to talk about this, because I think
Cool.
that as I've been working, this is the thing that I feel like I'm most improving on. I won't say improved, because I'm not where I want to be yet, but I think I'm better about it. When I first got started, I did a lot of work for a small publisher who does a lot of lesbian romances. So you're doing all women's voices, and it's like, well, how do I make them all sound different? I can't give everybody a different accent. But the more I've talked to people, the more I've listened to actors doing different voice roles, it's not necessarily about finding a different voice per se. It's not about dropping your voice all the time and then going really high. It's not necessarily about that. It's about intonation. It's about cadence. It's just, okay. So one thing that always bugged me when I was listening to audiobooks is hearing men do women's voices in a falsetto, because it's like, no. Or women doing men's voices really like upsettingly so. And it's like, it's distracting. But if you talk at a bit of a different cadence, if you talk more from your chest, if you're a woman doing a man's voice, you get that attitude across without necessarily having to hurt your voice putting it so low. And conversely, if you're a man doing a woman's voice, if you don't necessarily have to go all the way up, but you just kind of pitch your voice up, have, maybe they're a little bit giggly, or maybe they're a little bit sarcastic or something like that. An excellent example of a narrator who does that is James Marsden doing the Dresden Files audiobooks. He was, I think, kind of one of the first ones that really clued me in on, oh, you don't necessarily have to do a completely unrecognizable different voice. You just have to find the way that person talks. Like, sometimes accents do come into it. Somebody will be described as having a, Southern accent or an English accent or whatever. And it's fun. I love doing accents. But if you do a lot of characters who are in the same geographical area, chances are there isn't going to be that much accent skipping. So it's like I said in the previous answer, it's finding that character, even if it's a nameless clerk at a hotel. They might be bored and talk a little slower because, they're just so bored. Or
Right.
if it's a really excitable lab tech and they're just, everything they say is just so excited. And yeah, it's a lot about that cadence, the emotion, the pacing. That's a big thing I've had a lot of problems with is if I'm not thinking, I still tend to make every character talk with the same cadence I do. So it's a lot of conscious effort to slow down or to speed up or to vary. The way Steve would always put it was vary the music. Everybody has a particular kind of up and down pattern to the talk. And if you maybe put emphasis in different places than you're used to, things like that, it helps. It's a subtle thing, but it's something that people can pick up on.
Right. And how much of like the cadence and the pacing can actually be fixed in editing versus
I haven't found
some
any good
requests.
ways. So it's all just go back and re-record those lines that you're not happy with.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah. It's something that becomes more intuitive as it's like anything. Practice makes, I'm not going to say perfect, but makes better. And again, I edit myself because I don't want to pay somebody to do it. I want to keep all my profits. And so it's a lot of hearing my own voice and my own imperfections and having to listen to myself drone on for 8 to 10 hours at a time. It really makes you aware of your vocal tics, of your emphasis tics, of all the problems you have. But at the same time, it makes you realize, oh, I'm good at X, I'm good at Y. I'll have to remember that for next time. Editing sucks, but it's so helpful.
Oh, yeah.
So how would you first start listening to yourself in your works? Did you not like or kind of hate the sound of your own voice? And if so, kind of how long did it take you to get over that?
I'm so glad someone asked that.
No, that's a really, really important thing. Luckily for me, because I'd been podcasting for about, I guess, 5 years at that point, I would go back and listen. At first, I don't do this as much these days, but I would go back and listen to the episode once it was published and be like, oh, this is what I need to work on. I go back, kind of self-criticize. So I was used to hearing myself at that point. Not quite used to editing, but used to hearing myself in my headphones, realizing that your voice doesn't sound the same when it's, echoing inside your head as it does when it's coming back to your ears directly. And the hard part there is, up until recently, I've been doing a lot of romance books. So hearing yourself moan is, I think, a similar but slightly different experience. And you really, it just strips away your ego kind of quickly. Again, not right away, but after a while, it doesn't really feel like you're listening to yourself anymore. It feels like you're just listening to any other voice. It's just one that you can go back and kind of tweak and re-record stuff that you're not happy with. It does. I'd say it took me maybe 20 hours to get used to the sound of my own voice, maybe another 20 to stop hating it.
So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and they range anywhere from about 8 to 15 hours. About how long does it take you to record an audiobook, and what does that workflow look like?
Okay, this is a little bit of a complicated question. Like I said at the beginning, I have a disease. I have a syndrome that it's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, if you want to look it up. And so my endurance isn't near where I want it to be. Whether it's hours sitting, hours. Lately I've been recording standing just because I like to kind of move around and get into it now that I'm not worrying about hitting a wall. Well, I still have to worry about hitting a wall if we recorded that, but I don't have to worry about hitting like my desk and upending it and hearing that on the feedback. But usually on a good day, I can record for 3 to 4 hours on and off, like not at a straight stretch, but on and off. I know other narrators are different. Will Wheaton has talked about doing it for 8 hours at a time. And I'm like, how? The answer is a lot of practice. And then after that, there's the editing, which again can take anywhere from, 4 to 5 hours per recorded hour to, if you're really lucky, you find the right plugins, you find the right settings, you're happy with your performance, 2 hours per hour. Right now at about 2.5 hours per hour of recorded raw work. And I like to give myself about a month for each book because I can afford that right now. If I needed to, at first, when I was first starting out, I was like, oh, I can do this one book every 2 weeks. And that was, for me, an unsustainable schedule because of not being able to move out of bed for days at a time. So I would say if you want to start out, start easy. Start at a half hour of just talking, practicing, whatever. Then increase it to an hour at a time. And remember, try not to go over maybe more than that because it will take a toll on your voice. But see how long you can do before your voice starts sounding really scratchy. Scale back a little bit from that and then just keep practicing.
Who else has a question?
What did you learn from podcasting that helped you in the voice acting, and what did you learn in voice acting that helped you with podcasting? And then to kind of dovetail off of that, I'm guessing you didn't edit your own podcast. So after your experience with editing, how much more did you appreciate the editing that was being done for you on the podcast?
Okay, so initially, other than, the equipment, what really helped me was, like I said, being able to listen to the sound of my own voice and not completely hate it, just being used to that sound. And it kind of helped me with editing, honestly, with being able to listen to myself, not have to stop every now and then and go, ugh, being able to listen to the noises and the performance instead of, oh, do I really sound like that? So that part desensitized me. The kind of ability to know whereabouts to sit with a microphone, that helped a lot. And then with audiobooks, going back to podcasting, being even more aware of the microphone and my environment, and maybe that I shouldn't be typing all the time. Like I used to love to browse Twitter and Tumblr while I recorded, and I have stopped doing that because I feel so sorry you're right. I did not edit the podcast. And now that I know, oh my God, I was adding so much by like kicking my desk and having my setup right next to the air conditioner and, drinking water and then setting it down kind of harder than I intended, just all the little ambient noises. So I've liked to think that it's made me a bit more of a compassionate podcaster. I still hate editing, so I have not exactly jumped up to help with that with the current podcast. But I feel like I have an excuse because I'm also editing, anywhere from 6 to 10 hours of my own stuff. And it does give me the ability to actually be able to like, okay, we're really behind. Yeah, okay, I have some time, I'll edit.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else have another question?
How reliable is the work that comes in?
Okay, when I started through ACX, it's all you find your own auditions, you audition. Very likely you're never going to hear back because, people don't tend to send out, we didn't pick you, here's why letters. So you really only hear back from the positives, which at the time was like maybe I was really lucky. It was maybe about every 5 auditions. You can do hundreds of auditions and only get the one. I got lucky because, again, I had good audio quality, and that is a lot of it. But then I started working with another company called Findaway. It's findawayvoices.com. They're trying to build themselves as an alternative to ACX. Their staff there handles a bit more of the matchmaking. And through them, I've been getting really steady work. It's about maybe a book a month, which is at the moment all I can handle. But if you are the one who's going out and auditioning, and this is whether it's voice acting, whether it's audiobooks, just anything that you're doing, get used to hearing no, or get used to not hearing back at all. Realize it's a business. Don't take it personally, which is hard sometimes, especially if you find that one project that you were so excited about, you'd be perfect for. Chances are the people you're sending it into just had a different voice in mind, or somebody else did something on theirs that just happened to catch their ear. It's not personal. And if you keep going out and you keep auditioning, it's pretty reliable. There's plenty of work for everyone. Not all of it is legit. I can talk a little bit more about that. But if you go out and you look for it and you put yourself out there and you make the connections, there's work.
What resources would you recommend that are out there for somebody wanting to break into this kind of work?
Okay, Facebook, much as I hate it, has some really good groups. There's one that I'm on. It's like, it originally was just for narrators who worked with ACX, but pros started going there. People like me who go mostly through Findaway were going there. So now it's just an indie group. Let me pull it up real quick. I haven't been on Facebook in ages. But, oh, crud. Let me just go on my phone. But yeah, professional groups are really good. I'm sorry, since I'm looking down, the quality isn't as good. The group that I would recommend on Facebook is called Indie, ACX and Others, Audiobook Narrators, and I think publishers. Audiobook narrators and producers. So Indie, ACX and Others, Audiobook narrators and producers. There's a lot of resources in there, whether it's already been asked and is in like their FAQ section, or just going and asking people. And it's, again, people who are willing to help out. Some people there are kind of short because they've seen the same questions over and over and over. But I kind of tend to look at it like the Stanley thing of everyone's X is for any X, something is somebody's first X, whether it's, show, comic, or asking a question for advice. And there's just such a wealth of resources there in terms of the people, because there's people there who have been narrating professionally for years, and there's people who have just joined but may work with, like, say, the RX team or something like that, who can answer questions about technical stuff. And it's a lot of people answering questions. And I think about once a month, there's a post about, hey, post your latest accomplishment, whether it's a book or just something that you've learned or anything. So it's a pretty positive community. If you're working like I am specifically through Find a Way, there's a Find a Way narrators group. If you're doing audio plays, there's audio play voice actor group. There's, voice actors of color, voice actors who are women. There's so many specific little groups, voice actors in your city, things like that. And it's, again, much as I hate Facebook, a really good place to find groups of people. Twitter can be useful once you start following voice actors. They all tend to follow other voice actors. So it's really easy to just kind of hop off of replies if somebody says something you like, and, follow them, see what they're learning, see where they're working. Yeah, those are the big ones.
So what were the less than legit?
Okay. When I started out, first book, I had no idea what I was doing, no idea what a good price point was. I figured, I'll be able to edit real quick. So I was advertising myself for $25 per finished hour, which is bottom of the barrel. Just, you do not want to do that. You have to, real quick, I learned you have to value your time. You have to value your energy. You have to charge what you're worth. Even though right now I'm not charging what's currently SAG equivalent, which is like, I think, $350 per finished hour. I'm charging, I think I'm charging $200 per finished hour. I'd have to go back and check. But again, it's because I'm still in the process of upgrading my equipment. I know I am not offering a $350 per finished hour performance. But $25 per finished hour, you are not finding it. It's all baby's first novel. It's all people who there's a group of people who it's basically word padding. They'll offer, it's like a self-help book, but it's basically just the same thing over and over and over again. And it's because they want to get in on these Audible, like, romance packages and stuff like that, or self-help packages. There's some people who, there's 3 ways that you can get paid. There's what I do, which is per finished hour, which you get maybe, let's say $300 per finished hour. So you turn in what is an 8-hour book that took you those 8 hours to record, plus, however many, 16, 20, 30, 50 hours of editing time. And that's why it's so expensive to get an audiobook produced. So those tend to be authors who can rely on their sales, or people who are independently wealthy. And yeah, you tend to get a better quality with people who are willing to pay finished hour. There's royalty share, which is a mix of what I'm about to say, which is just flat out royalty. That tends to be what a lot of people going in first time do, because there's so much more work out there if you're willing to do royalties. However, I would not recommend it unless you just want to do this as a hobby or for practice, or if the author is incredibly well, is like Stephen King, because otherwise you aren't seeing a cent. You are seeing very little money. And the royalty share is, okay, I'll take like half my rate per finished hour, but I also get a smaller negotiated percentage than just flat out royalty of the book. And that, it can go either way. Again, do your homework, find out how much of a readership this author has. But I don't have that same reservation with it that I do flat out royalty. And there's a lot of people who, if you do, I've heard horror stories of people who will sign up for a royalty share hybrid and will just end up getting the royalty. Because again, it's indie companies don't have the very best way of enforcing in mind. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad to work with Findaway, is so that you don't have to keep getting after people to, hey, about this thing that you owe me, it's 3 months overdue for the money. Or for, in the terms, on the flip side, from the author's point of view, hey, you said you would be done 3 months ago. I'm checking in. And ACX, for example, has no real way of holding that author accountable. Whereas Findaway, because it's a smaller company, because it works with a smaller pool, they're good about checking in on you. So yeah, it's finding those deals, those jobs that are too good to be true, the very obviously word padded stuff, and making sure that you are charging what you're worth, because that tends to kind of weed out some of those, for lack of a better term, scam books.
Anybody else have a question?
So when it comes to regards of, advertising yourself, through Findaway or like through your own website, when you're starting up, do you go immediately towards like, the smaller companies? Do you kind of step back and say, hey, I should probably, kind of get some demo reels started all the way from fantasy to like, something you hear at a recorded bank phone call and then put it on a website? Or, does Findaway kind of do that for you and make it a little bit easier for you to display that?
Okay. Findaway does make it easy. They're the ones who, somebody will say, okay, I want an author who is in, male, female, whatever, this voice range at this price. And maybe they'll say my book has a lot of accents. I kind of specialize in being a quick accent study. So a lot of the books that I've gotten are stuff where the author's like, oh, this person can do accents. Let's hear it. I will send in, what they do is they get their small group of narrators. They say, hey, here's the sample that we want you to do. They'll send it in, and the author then makes a choice, which is great. It's so much less work on my end. But if you're doing independently or through ACX, you're the one who has to put yourself out there. You find the auditions. You are the one who records, and well, you're always the one who records and sends in the sample. But the author is, in those cases, more inundated than they are with Findaway, which is a smaller group. So you have less of a chance of being noticed. When it comes to advertising, I found Twitter to be pretty good at it. Indie writing communities tend to be very kind of, I wouldn't say so much like, in some cases, like a family. Everybody's heard of everyone else. And if somebody's like, oh, I worked with this person, people are likely to remember, okay, this is a person who's easy to work with. That's in the voice acting, in audiobooks, whatever. If you are somebody who's reliable and pleasant to work with, that's worth as much, if not more, as a good quality performance. Just because somebody can be the best voice actor ever, and if they're just a pain in the ass to work with, if they're, flaky, then you're not going to want to recommend them to people in good conscience. I mean, yeah, they did okay, but was it worth it? And it's finding those small communities, putting yourself out there, that gets you known. I mean, there's a way to do it where you have to kind of walk that line of, hey, this is what I do. Have you checked this out? And constantly being that person who hops into people's feeds and is like, hey, FYI, I do this. It's kind of finding that friendly tone and not that, is this person a bot or not tone. I go to a lot of conventions. So again, like voice actors, authors tend to be very approachable and will talk with you about stuff, even if they don't, maybe take you up on your offer of, hey, what wouldn't it be cool if we worked together or something like that? If you're looking for a narrator, here's my stuff. They might, remember you and recommend you to somebody, a friend of theirs who's, on Discord with them one night, like, oh, I'm thinking of doing an audiobook, but I don't know. They might be able to say, hey, even if they don't say, hey, here's a person to do your audiobook, they'll be like, hey, here's somebody to ask about doing audiobooks and the logistics of that. And working with people in that regard makes them more likely to want to work with you again because you're a known quantity. Yeah, it's kind of tough, the self-advertising part, but if you're okay with everything being kind of a slow process of, again, you have to think of yourself as a product, as a brand, and you have to market yourself as such. And if like in my case, it's somebody who's easy to work with, friendly, good accents. And in your case, it might be always get stuff done on time, answers questions quickly, excellent audio quality, something like that. And you have to really know that and be able to build your brand on that so that you are not just like, oh, this person does voices. People tend to remember short, specific things. I don't know if any of what I said resolved the original question or not. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Like, no, like you've definitely answered the bill because, it sounds like it's just, being very friendly, kind of like LinkedIn in that respect, right? Where you're just, hey, I'm chill, man, I'm friendly, and people remember that. And like you said, if it's short, and that sounds pretty amazing. You've definitely answered my question. Don't worry about that.
Thank you. I've been a little bit scattered all morning. I didn't drink coffee this morning.
Oh no.
Yeah, I had some green tea, but it wasn't quite, I think, the caffeine dosage I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's horrible. I can't go without coffee. Does anybody else have any final questions?
What are your most and least favorite parts of your job?
Okay. Most favorite is it's bringing this story to life. I love books. I love reading. One of the first times I ever got in trouble in school was I was in preschool and I knew how to read and I was reading under my desk because I was so bored and the teacher didn't believe I could read. And it's just always been that with me, like reading at the dinner table, reading while I'm walking. I have like, I think right now 20 books on my Kindle downloaded on my phone. About 10 of those have been opened and read to some degree. And I have something like 50 tabs of fanfic open on my phone. I love stories. I love characters. Even before I was like, well, maybe voice acting is good. I love characters. I used to do like live journal role playing because it's like, oh, I love this character. What would they do if they're in this situation? Whatever. And being able to help bring a story to life in a different medium is amazing. The author trusted you enough to put their baby in your hands. And again, because I write, I know how protective you can get about a story that you wrote, you're basically, there's an author who was like, how to write, open a vein on a page and bleed. And it is kind of like that. So being able to work with an author and to bring this to a new audience, whether it's, the visually impaired or people who just aren't good visual processors or people who are on rides, like long car drives or walks or whatever, knowing that they get to experience this story it's wonderful to me. It's the best high. The worst part is, again, the editing, just because there's so much other stuff I'd rather be doing. Even if I'm going to be sitting at a computer, I'd rather be, right now I'm playing Outer Worlds. And it's like, okay, I'm experiencing a story, but a different story that I haven't experienced before, instead of, well, okay, this is the one that I had to take apart and dissect. And now I'm listening to myself read it back, and it's less about the story than it is the performance. And it's just, oh, I have to listen to myself for so long. But because it makes you hyper aware of your flaws. And I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't know many people that enjoy editing. I know I don't.
I don't.
I think there are some people who honestly do. There's, again, if you
Yeah,
go on the NDACX group, there's so many people who are willing to hire themselves out
Yeah, they're
as
called
editors.
masochists.
Yeah, basically. But, everybody has their own specific interests. Somebody might find, just seeing the waveforms and being able to just kind of massage the performance. They might think that is just like the best thing ever, and that's their high. It is not mine.
No, mine either.
nor mine.
I have a question for you, and then we'll see if anybody else has one last question. So you talked about where your price point, or like the SAG price point is $350 for every finished hour.
I believe. I could be wrong. It could be 400 something.
But yours is lower because you don't have the equipment.
I don't.
Because,
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to focus on the equipment real quick. What would be, in your opinion, the minimum equipment to get into this? Because I know you listed the equipment you have, and I know there's only like 2 of us, maybe 3, that have anything close to what you've got.
Okay. That kind of depends on your recording environment. If you have again, you don't even need like a whisper room or anything like that. You don't need. What you can do is get a closet that has a lot of clothes in it. You can do, like I've done, hang up moving blankets. You can do what I've also done, purchase the sound foam. There's all sorts of things on ways to kind of soundproof your area. And if you get that, what I would recommend is a non-USB mic. One that you can, it has, I forget what it's called, but it has the 3 prongs that you plug in. Because
XLR.
USB
XLR.
mics, yeah, XLR, thank you. USB mics cause a little bit of extra background noise that they don't have just quite the same. You guys know what I mean. It doesn't sound the same. So get a mic that does that. It can, if you have a lot of, okay, like I have with the Shure right now. This was mostly because my previous recording area was just my living room. So this was there to block out most of the noise. If you can get a condenser mic, I know that's pretty much what most people want to work with. One thing I can highly recommend is, and not just because they're my friends, but Better Podcasting. They do a lot of questions about, they on their YouTube channel and stuff, on their podcast, they'll try out different microphones, different mixers, things like that. And I would also recommend just a very simple 1 or 2 channel mixer. I'd say 2 in case, like what happened to me, 1 blows out. But I've had a lot of luck with the Onyx. It wasn't that expensive. I think the condenser mic that I'm looking at right now it's a kit, and it's like $200, but it's really good quality. Yeah, the 3 things you need: good space, XLR mic, decent mixer.
Thank you. Does anybody else have one final question? We've got about enough time for one final question.
You can make it as silly as you want.
All right, I've been dying to ask.
Yes, please.
All right, so when it comes to audiobooks, do you think that if T-Pain had an autobiography, it would be narrated completely in auto-tune?
Jesus Christ.
Oh, God.
You said crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So from a realistic standpoint, that would be the worst thing ever to listen to for 6+ hours. I think you can use it sparingly throughout it. And I think if he's on brand, would. But again, you're going to be making something that is going to be in people's ears for hours at a time. It needs to be listenable. That said, I do think it would be fun to hear him do like the chapter headers or something like that in auto-tune.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
All right.
Again,
well,
it's like I said earlier, you find a brand, you push it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks again so much, Lauren, for doing this.
No
You've
problem.
given us such awesome information, and you've been a pleasure to talk to today.
Thank you. I'm sorry for my numerous brain farts.
No. You've been absolutely wonderful. Is there anything that you want to plug or promote before we let you go today?
Okay, so pretty much everything that I'm currently on or have been on can be found at my website, lwsalinas.com. It's lwsalinas.com. My Twitter is at Sithwich, Sithwitch, and I am happy to answer questions after this. It's oftentimes a lot easier to reach me through Twitter, and I'll get back to you quicker just because I have the app on my phone. I'm always on Twitter. I'm always up for answering questions, for linking you to people who will better be able to answer the question if I can't. Yeah, and if you like Marvel, check out Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. We talk about Marvel a lot, and I am just as chatty there as I was here, so I apologize.
No, don't apologize. We enjoy chatty. That's why we're all in it, right?
It's more that I tend to talk over people because I get really excited about things.
Yeah, you should listen to Satis sometime. That's all we do.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't appreciate that tone, Jason. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Lauren. Really appreciate this. We're going to have this posted for everybody in CBC as well as creator partners. We know a lot of people over at Gonna Geek, including Stargate Pioneer and Stephen John Drew, and we're going to make this available for the people over there as well. So thank you very, very much. And if there's anything ever that you need from us, just give us a shout.
Thank you, and same.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.